This might seem like a totally random hill in the middle of nowhere in Ireland, but it is the birthplace of one of the biggest holidays celebrated around the world. Okay, so you must be wondering, what on earth am I on about and what does it have to do with the outdoors? And I'm talking about Halloween. It comes from a Celtic pagan festival, Samhain, and I'm going to tell you all about how that happened and also about the Púca Festival that I recently went to. A lot of the pagan festivals celebrated the changing of the seasons, and Samhain is no different. It celebrates the end of the harvest and the beginning of the darker half of the year. So a lot of Irish folklore is centred around nature itself, as I said, the changing of the seasons, the passing of time, as well as native Irish plants and animals. And if you spent any time in Ireland at all, or you know anything about Ireland, you've probably come across some of these stories. Like a lot of our place names, for instance, come from stories that would have taken place somewhere nearby. If you go into the countryside at all, you're bound to come across like standing stones, fairy rings, burial mounds, the whole lot. They're absolutely everywhere. As I said, Samhain is a harvest festival and it takes place on the 31st of October every year, as everyone already knows. And it is roughly halfway between the autumn equinox, that celebrates the beginning of the harvest, and the winter solstice, which is halfway through the winter. But it is also a liminal time of the year, and that means the veil between our world and the other world is particularly thin. Friends and family that have passed away can come and revisit their homes, and often a place was set for them at the table because obviously it's a festival, it's time for feasting. A lot of music and games and food, and a lot of bonfires were lit, particularly in the Hill of Tara, which is the famous one that everyone has always heard of, the Hill of Ishnock, as well as the Hill of Ward, which is also known as Clochtha. And it's from the fire at Clochtha that every other fire in Ireland was rekindled in celebration. But along with loved ones, other creatures could also pass through. And there are loads of stories of fairies and werewolves passing through burial mounds back into our world. And of course there's the famous story that we've all come across of Fionn McCool, who defended Tara against a fire-breathing demon. And the story goes that this demon would come along and burn down the palace to the ground. These other fairies and creatures were known to snatch livestock, food, and even your children. And it's thought that this is where the tradition of dressing up in costumes comes from. So the idea was, if you dress your children in disguise as a fairy or werewolf or something spooky, that it is actually to protect them against being abducted by said spooky things. And that brings us back to the Púca Festival. So the Púca is one of these creatures that you may come across during Samhain. And he's known as a trickster and very mischievous, but also as a shapeshifter. So he might appear as a goat, a dog, a cat, a hare, a horse, or even a human. So a lot of the stories mention that the Púca will basically trick people into climbing on his back, and then he will bring them on a ride around, absolutely terrifying them, and then just dropping them back wherever he got them. But there's also a couple stories that I came across where the Púca basically seems to be like a vampire. So it involves like drinking blood and killing people and eating them and stuff like that. So the jury is out on whether or not the Púca is a good guy or not. But either way, there's a whole festival dedicated to the Púca and Samhain, and it takes place at the end of October every year. The festival runs over a couple of days and it takes place in Athboy and Trim in County Meath, and there is a whole load of stuff to do. The harvest market is the main place to go, and it's made up of a mixture of people selling crafts as well as demonstrations of traditional crafts like wood carving, traditional cooking demonstrations, battle reenactments, birds of prey, and a lot of like traditional games. So it was great for the kids as well. And of course there were a lot of food stalls, so I was kept happy. But they also had a jam-packed schedule with loads of different tours that you could go on. And there was a good mixture of different topics as well. So for example, I went on a tour that brought us to Clochtha and did like a little walking tour around it. So that was more based on like the historical aspect of it, like the origins of Samhain itself, how it was celebrated, all that kind of stuff. But then there were also a bunch of different like storytelling tours as well that I thought were really good. There was another one as well that was like foraging and folklore that I didn't get to go to, but I really, really want to. So I'm going to keep an eye out for tickets for this year because I'm definitely going back. On the night of the 31st, there's like a bonfire ceremony where the fire is lit, and then on the last night there's a closing procession, basically like a parade, and it was great crack. And then after the parade was finished, there was also a fire performance that took place outside Trim Castle that was really, really cool to see as well. But the whole town was absolutely mental. Like I thought it was a fairly small festival that you know, I only heard about because I saw like a YouTube video on it ages ago. I'd never actually heard anyone talking about it. But yeah, the place was absolutely packed. All of the local businesses had like put up decorations. There was like a little fairground that had been set up. The amount of free stuff as well, like the harvest market was completely free to enter, and to see all of like the demonstrations and, like I said, the battle reenactments and all that kind of stuff, it was totally free. The only things that you did have to pay for were the tours themselves, and there were some music and comedy gigs on in the evening time. And again, like I said, I would book the tickets for those fairly well in advance because they seem to sell out very quickly. But there was like free parking everywhere. There were shuttle buses to and from the two spots. Like I said, it was spread out over Trim and Boyo also. And then for the tour around Cloughtha, we had to get a shuttle bus there as well, so that was super cool. But like there were stewards absolutely everywhere. There were information booths, there were bathrooms, the whole thing. Like you could go and spend the day. Like I spent the whole weekend there, and I actually just ate at the festival. I didn't even eat out anywhere else, like any of the local restaurants. We were just picking up stuff at the festival. Loads of vegetarian and vegan options also, just FYI. But yeah, if you're looking for a fun way to spend your Samhain this year, I would highly recommend checking it out. So I'll throw the link in the description below and you can have a look. As I said, Irish folklore is really closely tied with nature, so I have a couple of books I'd recommend if anyone fancies a bit more further reading. There's a series by Niall Mac Coitir. Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. But it's Ireland's Wild Plants, Myths, Legends and Folklore. And this one is Trees, and the other one is Animals. And I know there's a fourth one, Birds, but I haven't bought that one yet. It's on my never-ending list of books to buy. But yeah, they're really nice. Like they have like really nice illustrations and stuff. They're just lovely books to read. They have loads of like little stories and stuff, obviously to do with their native plants and animals. But a lot of the Irish names have like little stories attached to them, like how they got their name or why we call them certain things. And also plants and animals appear quite often in a lot of our traditional stories and folklore and things like that. So any stories that are associated with any of them, they're referenced in here as well. So I'll be back out and about soon. I know this isn't my usual spot. I'm usually up a mountain or in a forest or something somewhere. But yeah, the next video that's coming out is the layer system for clothing when you're out hiking, particularly in cold weather, which is all year round if you're here in Ireland. But yeah, that's all from me for the moment. So I will talk to you soon. Happy hiking, August, slán go fóill.